Hello and welcome to Expert City. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more videos. Today's project is the ChatGPT Historian. Here, you're going to see us use APIs to integrate ChatGPT with our Python project. Now, this isn't about LLMs or natural language processing. We're going to have a video on that later, so do subscribe once again. But this is about how to use OpenAI's APIs to integrate them and create a simple Python code with generative AI capabilities. So this is the application. Now, the situation is that we can ask any question about the Cold War. For example, who do you think won the Cold War? And you can choose your expert. For example, if you're asking the question to a USA supporter, takes a second for the AI to kick in, but it's going to say the US unequivocally won the war. Now, if I ask a neutral expert the exact same question without changing anything at all, it's going to say it's more of a slight nuance. And if I go to a USSR supporter and ask the exact same question, it's going to say, well, you know what? The USSR kinda won. And so, whilst it's the same question, based on the context of the expert, you get 3 different responses from ChatGPT. Now, before we head further into the code to understand what I did here, we really need to look into APIs. So we're right back where we started again, and let's look at APIs versus SDKs. Now, these are the 2 most common ways that we have for our program to interact with external applications. So these external application providers offer both these services in general, and APIs are normally lighter weight versions, and SDKs are more involved. So if you have a tiny project that has a small requirement, it's better to go for an API. But if your application or project entirely revolves around a third-party application, or a substantial part of it goes to an external application, that's when you choose an SDK. Now, it takes some time to get used to an SDK and how it works, whereas APIs are rapid fast to deploy. Also, SDKs are platform dependent as well, so only go towards that direction if you really need it. Otherwise, it's just an over-engineered solution for a simple problem. To differentiate between both, when you have messaging maps and you're trying to share your location to a friend, you probably want an API call because it's simple, quick, and easy to add as a function. All I have to do is share my location, and then my friend can just open that location separately in an application. When it comes to SDKs, if I'm say using Uber to get a ride, then I need to see the map continuously on my home screen, which is why an SDK is more suited for this kind of application. To get started with OpenAI's API suite, you can scan the link or just type the address you see above. Now we're going to come back to the right side image in just a second, and this is because for VS Code's Jupyter notebooks, the key doesn't integrate properly. Now it's not going to make sense now, but we're going to get there in just a second. Once you click that link, you should come to this particular page, Overview. Here you have a quick start code along with the different models and the pricing for each model. It's a great place to start with your ChatGPT developer journey. I'm going to head into the quick starts, and this is how you can start coding straight away. So step 1 is to create an API in the dashboard. So you can either do that by hitting the dashboard or just clicking on the link here. And as you can see, this is my secret key that I use to allow ChatGPT to understand that I'm the one making the requests. So it can tag it to me, it can bill me for the purchases that I make, and so on. But yeah, going back to documents and going back to the quick start, once you create your new API, you're going to have to store it as an environment variable. The alternative would be to enter your secret code in each of your programs that you make. And it's not just cumbersome, it's also a security risk because people can see your code. I'm going to be sharing my screen in a second with my code, and so it would be a terrible idea for me to just show my API key there. So you can either use this method or go back to the place I asked you to stop for a second and follow the steps that I mentioned there for using it on VS Code, because it seems to have a problem with the ZSHRC files. Maybe it worked for you directly, but that was an issue for me, so the solution that worked for me is back there. Once you've done that, you can quickly install OpenAI for the Python version on your terminal, and so it completely gets the library ready for you. Now, all you have to do is copy this code, paste it into your Python files wherever you're using it. For example, I've made a small change here, but it's more or less the same code. And now there are two key components you need to understand here. I have content for the system and the user. So these are the two things you need to understand. User is us, we're typing in the questions and stuff like that, whereas system refers to ChatGPT. So the user's content is usually the question that's being asked, whereas the system's content is kind of like context, where ChatGPT understands the role that it has to play. For example, in our GUI interface you saw earlier, that would mean, is it a USA supporter or a USSR supporter? As you can see here, I've given it a slight context, and so the answer is going to be based on the context and the question. And so it's a good idea to usually play around with these. You can understand the way inputs need to be drafted and the way the outputs come back to you. And you can play around with the components of the outputs as well. For example, what is the content? How do I access the message within the choices of completion? So on and so forth. And once you have a good idea of what's happening here, you can jump into the GUI software. Now again, this is nothing fancy as you saw earlier. It's a very simple piece of code where step one, I just call in OpenAI, and because I have an environment variable, you can directly get my key. If not, I would have had to type in my key somewhere here, which is, like I said, a security risk. Now I've given it three situations where, whilst I've put the radio option that you saw on the GUI as a simple USA supporter, I've encoded that to mean you're an expert Cold War historian who strongly supports USA and hates the USSR. And to that, I've added, please limit your response to under 100 words, so you get a short and crisp answer. And then the idea is very simple. I just create a GUI using tkinter with 3 radio buttons as you saw earlier, and a space to just type in the message. I've also made the default a neutral expert because that's probably what people want, a neutral opinion on the topic. And I've also created a situation where I'm like, I do not want the question to be too long. And with that, you have the answer, and you collect the answer. You extract the part. As you can see, I selected a 4.0 mini because it's relatively cheaper than, let's say, an 0.1. And I'm passing in the system and user prompt, as I mentioned earlier. I collect the contents of the message, put in an error handling just in case something bad happens, and send it through. So that is how our application was made. Thank you so much for watching, and in the next video I'm going to talk about NLP and LLMs. So I look forward to seeing you there. Bye bye.